Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners, and welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Bryan O'Rourke. Again, it is already June. We're nearly half over 2021 already, which is amazing. I really appreciate everyone joining. Things in the U.S. and in parts of Europe have really started opening up. Of course, there still remains many challenges. India, Brazil, and several other spots in the world are facing continued challenges in the fitness space from the pandemic, but we're hopeful that things overall continue to improve as things get back to a more normal set of circumstances. So I'm continuing to send the positive vibes out and hoping that trend does not stop as we all get back to our industry operating where it needs to be. A few mentions before we get Annie's podcast going. Which was great. I really enjoyed it. Just to mention about URSA in Dallas in October, ursa.org, check it out. Also want to give a shout out to FitTech Summit and that event with our associate Natalia Karbakova, who's fantastic. We had her on the podcast before. That summit out of Munich was well done. So congrats to the group there and all they're doing. And also shout out to all of our FitC members. We've had numbers of brands join us in the last few months, so we really appreciate that. And today, one of those people that have joined us is Annie Faltman. I don't know how many of you might know Annie. She is in Sweden, in fact, in a northern part of Sweden near the Arctic Circle. You can actually see the Northern Lights from where she is. She has 4 training centers. I first met Annie back in Portugal during the European Congress of URSA, I think about 3, maybe coming up on 4 years ago. And, you know, it's always great to speak to really intelligent folks from the industry. Annie's been in this space for a long time. She's had her own business now for over a dozen years with her training centers. And we're going to talk about some, applications of technology and what they're experiencing. Sweden and her clubs, they didn't shut down per se. There were certain limitations and restrictions, but they never really shut down. And her company's seeing a lot of growth. She's done some very wise things in adopting technology in her clubs. So, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you will too. Look for the links in the show notes that'll explain more about Annie and her background. So without further ado, let's have Annie Faltman on the show. Well, listeners, as I mentioned in the intro, Annie is spending time with us from Sweden today. She was just telling me how beautiful the weather is. It's quite far north up there, isn't it, Annie?
Yeah, it is quite near the Arctic Circle. So we get all seasons, mostly winter, but they're all included. Summer is like 4 weeks.
Yes, I've been following you for a long time, Andy, and in the intro, mention about your 360 training centers, of which you have 4, but I do recall us meeting, I think, in person for the first time in Portugal at one of the URSA events, I think the EU Congress, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, that was what, 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think it'd be 3 years ago this in October.
Yes, that's right. We, Annie has really shared some interesting stories we're going to get into right now. But Annie, tell us a little bit about your 360 training centers and the 4 of them that you have in Sweden, and tell me how you got started.
Well, the first club was open in 2009, and before that, I spent about 30 years in the industry, actually moving into the health sector as a physiotherapist back in the 97, I think it was. And I didn't really like it in the health sector in Sweden. It's very governmental and there's not really room for entrepreneurial thinking. So I went back to our fitness industry in 2009, opened my first club, and since then opened another three clubs. The last one was in 2016. Yeah, and it's been quite a journey. Learned a lot during the years, and it's especially the last year. I think it's been very challenging in many ways
Yes.
for all of us.
Yes. And you now tell us about your experience with that. Sweden was different than a lot of countries. I think you maintained your operations. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, so we actually never closed. To this day, we never closed. Last year, in the beginning of 2020, when the first outbreak was, we stayed open with restrictions, of course, with numbers of people in the club and the group X. And then it was quite a good summer for us, actually, because infections were not that bad. And then in November, it was like going into a brick wall, and it was tough, really tough, because people were hesitant to come to the clubs, and with the restrictions in place, we've been struggling for sure. But I also think that it's been very the challenge has been to be very inventful in many ways. I think for the past year with my staff, we've been more inventful than we've been in the last 10 years. It's not always what happens when you're in a crisis. You're forced to invent something to make it work there and then. And there's no room for thinking about it and trying it and testing it, and you just push it out there.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah.
What was an example of something that inventful that you really are proud of or you thought was great?
Well, I think one of the products that came out was what we call 360 Home, which was a PT program that we invented like mostly overnight. And it was a new membership that we didn't have before, where people could join online and take part of our app and our on-demand classes, and also get their coaching with PT online, which we never have done before, but which was quite successful. You have to remember, people have still been coming to the clubs.
Yeah.
So we had about 50% dropout in as far as visits, not in memberships, but visits from November. And so we've been working sort of both on site and online.
And when we were talking about this, podcast, something came up when we, of course, talking about technology, is the subject of retention. And you had, talked about over the years, you've heard about retention, of course, with onboarding, follow up, all the things that you have to do. But with your deployment of your app, when did you start deploying an app in your business? How long has that been?
So that was actually in 2015 when we first started working with the app on a business model, both with connecting with members and also the web shop and messaging and all that. And what I was telling you, Bryan, before is that what strikes me is that you have to understand we have 4 clubs, but there's only one club that is actually, there's a reception and it's staffed most of the time. So a lot of our members, we never see them. They buy their memberships online, they extend their memberships, we communicate with them through the app, but we never get a face-to-face time with them, and still retention is so high. So that's what got me thinking, well, maybe retention, as we used to think of it, like you have to have a sit down face-to-face, what do you need to stay in our club. Maybe that's not as important if you have technology in place where you can actually, if you have a good product where it meets all their needs that they want.
Yes.
Then they're happy about that, and we could actually maybe think of ourselves as more like a customer service central where we are. That's our city club where we are staffed all the time. So some of the members we never even speak to. So and they're still buying new memberships, so they must be happy.
Yeah, and you look at the customer experience in other industries, and them either whether it's Amazon in the States or even Apple. Unless you're in a store, or in the case of Amazon or e-commerce, you never speak to anybody. But the NPS scores of those brands are some of the highest in the
Yeah.
world. So
Yeah.
obviously customers, as long as they're getting what they want in a very easy way, I think they are going to be happy. And then if you have your people involved and well trained, if they need to talk to a person, that's okay, and you're set to do that. But if it's very well done and seamless and convenient and easy, I think people are happy to do it that way, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. And especially the younger generation, they're more bothered if I ever call them up. They're like, well, why are you calling me? What do you want? What did I do?
Yeah.
Just check in and see if you're happy. But on the MPS as well, with through the system that we have the welcome checkpoint. They get their message. We do 6 weeks, 20 weeks, and 30 days before they expire. And it's just a short text. And also we do a small MPS survey with them. It's not a full one. It's just, they just tick a box. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you wondering about something? And they can send a comment. And people actually reply to those texts quite a lot. So we have sort of an ongoing feedback from the members as to what they're thinking about.
You know, I
So
would,
it's not just doing an annual MPS
right,
score. It's
right. It's an ongoing engagement. What impresses me is, when you look at certain markets around the world, is I know that Sweden in general is a very high adopter of technologies, even in general, I find them to be. Do you think that's generally true compared to other nations, or no?
I think we are early adapters, and I think we're curious to see what's out there. And maybe it's because we're a small country and we don't want to be left out. We just want to be part of the world. So we're just curious to see what's out there. What can we use? What can we incorporate with the business? And our strategy has been like yes to technology, but it has to be like part of our brand, and it has to feel right. That it's professional and it looks good, and it's
Yeah, I mean, the reason I brought that up was that, in general, was that, doing SMS, NPS surveys that you described in a pattern that you described is not that common in the States, surprisingly.
oh
Yeah, in our businesses, we adopt SMS, in that way, but there are a lot of folks that haven't, it's just interesting to me because I think it's such a smart way to engage with your clientele and membership in the way you described it. So, I don't know what keeps people from doing it. I'm not sure. I think there's some biases with respect to people wanting to have the face to face. There's also some biases. Well, don't reach out to the members because they might cancel. Let sleeping dogs lie. But it's surprising in the U.S. that there aren't far more brands that are adopting that kind of automation via SMS because it's just smart to do in the right way.
yeah, we find it very helpful, and especially keeping. I think that's part of what I'm saying with the retention, that the members think that we are. Well, they don't think we are. We are keeping in touch with them, and we're asking them all the time, "How do you have any questions? Let
Yes.
us call you back." Another thing we've been doing that's been very good actually is we put up roll-ups in the clubs. It's just a QR code, and it just says anything broken, missing, questions, so people just can get their phone up, scan the QR code, and you get the what do you call that? Like you just fill out.
Yeah,
It's
the form.
easy, yeah, the form just to, and I think especially for the younger people, because my experience is that like the millennials, they don't want to go on a website and then they have to do 3 or 4 clicks to connect. They just get their phone, QR, and type, done, sent.
That's right.
It's a new phenomenon for me. I mean, I think you can go on the website, but obviously that's too far away.
Well, I think it's a great example of what you described in the SMS with NPS and other things, where the easier it is and the faster, more convenient it is, the more people will tend to adopt it and do it nowadays. Where
Yeah.
if you create barriers, we did some work on the customer journey with a well-known chain in the United States, and we mapped out the process to purchase personal training, and it was 16 steps. And
Uh,
yeah, today that's such a barrier to actually buy. People will, after 2 or 3 steps, they're like, well, what else do I have to do? Here's my money. It's like, no, 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 no. You can't. You've got to make it harder. It's crazy.
We get about 10 texts from that QR code every day, and it's everything from, hey, I love your staff, to the cable is about to break in that machine, or whatever.
Yep.
So,
It's good
yeah.
feedback loop. Good feedback loop. What other things have you done with Tech Annie? Because I know you're an early adopter, as you said. What other stuff have you done?
No, it's just, I think it's most people, everybody's done in the business, in the industry now, is, the classes online and PT sessions online. I think that's more like a hygiene factor
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
It's not on USP anymore. People are like, yo, yeah, they expect that from you.
Yes, absolutely. And how many members do you serve in your clubs right now? What is the size of your membership base?
Well, it used to be 5,000. It was down to 4,000, and then we're picking up again. So I think we're like maybe 4,300 today.
Yeah.
So we're getting back to 5,000
Well,
slowly.
slowly, yes, but you
Yeah.
do well though, given everything going on. So I noticed the article recently. I think we talked about this. Is you putting? My daughter's an artist. She's a painter, and she's been published. And I noticed the art you're doing on the walls of the clubs that you have. Tell me about that. That's a little non-tech. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh, that was just, it started with one of our members is a very talented artist. She does these photo arts, and we had we had a lot of walls that were screamingly empty and boring. So we asked her, would you like to post your art in our club? And she was super happy, of course, because she didn't have a platform, like an, an on-site platform to show her work. So she put up her work on the walls, and it's gorgeous. So people are like amazed when they get there, because it's like it's that wow factor. You don't expect that when you get into the club, to see art on the walls. And we just thought of it as, it's a win-win situation. We get beautiful walls, she gets exposure, and we don't charge each other any money for this. It's just a business to business thing, and turned out really good. So after that, we actually had some more inquiries now from other artists to see if we have any more walls available.
I thought it looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, Annie, a couple final questions, and thanks again for making time from Sweden. Now that you've been in the business for as long as you have been in the business, and I know that you have a pretty good grasp of what's going on around the world and trends, et cetera. I know you keep up with all that. Is there any insight that you could give our listeners about your experiences to get where you are? What are a couple of lessons or tips that you would be willing to share with the audience about your journey?
Well, I think one of the things is I'm always curious to learn things. I'm always looking for best practice, and I try to stay connected with different networks. Like in Sweden, we have our own club network, but also URSA has been a huge important factor, I think, as far as both the European Congress, which I've been to 4 times now, and also other networking events, like staying connected with our suppliers, building relationships, club owners. You make friends, and when you have that network, you can always call someone or ask someone. I do that on a weekly basis. If I have something that I wonder about, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to call Amancio in Portugal and ask him. I remember he said something about this. So that's I think that's you have to stay open-minded and be curious. I think curious is my takeaway word.
Yeah, I remember that because when I first met you, I'd heard of you, and when I first met you in Portugal, you were very curious about everything. I remember that about you. So that's a good way to be. I think open-minded and curious is a very much an important thing. And for the listeners too, another thing they may not realize is Annie's right near the Arctic Circle, so you can see in the wintertime you can see the northern lights. What do they call the northern lights in Sweden? What's the name for it?
Norrsken.
Okay.
Yeah, we see them all the time, so they're not that special really to us. Yeah, but they are beautiful. It's such a amazing phenomenon that you can see.
Well, Annie, I want to thank you for making time for our listeners today. I know we're going to have in the show notes and look for them, folks, links to Annie's clubs. You can learn more about her. We're going to give you her LinkedIn profile, etc., so you can research her, even look at some of the pictures of her clubs, and some of them where they have the art on the wall, like I had mentioned earlier. It's such a pleasure to visit. Thanks for your insights, Annie. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hello, listeners. This is Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks so much for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. The podcast is made possible by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, a consortium of global brands working together to enhance the adoption of technologies in the fitness space. Our company, Videri Ventures, which is invested in Vertimax, Montezuma, Gold's Gym, Houston, Texas, and Fitness 24/7 Thailand, also underwrites the podcast, along with our service companies, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and others. Please feel free to share this podcast with your colleagues. And if I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or find me on any of the major social networks. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.